Okay, inshallah, then I think people will trickle in and we will, they'll catch up. So with that, I am going to actually pass it on to Malaika, who is our secretary at My Voice, and she'll take it from here. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Malaika.
Welcome, everybody. It's really nice to be here. Let me just start off by introducing My Voice. My Voice is an organization run by the youth, for the youth, for almost 8 years. Its main goal is to give youth a creative outlet with an opportunity to express themselves and simultaneously learn new skills every day. This year, My Voice is taking it one step further, capitalizing on leadership skills and providing opportunities that give youth the opportunity to apply those skills in real life situations. Um, One thing I would ask is don't forget to follow our social medias at My Voice on Instagram, and check out our websites where we are posting most of our um, um, interactions and our initiatives due to COVID-19. I'm really excited for today and can't wait to see everything.
All right, thank you so much, Malaika. And Saliha, I'm just going to let you take the lead from here.
Perfect. So once again, just for our newer attendees that have joined us just recently in the past minute or so, I wanted to really briefly introduce myself. My name is Saliha. I am a communications team member with Justice for All Canada. Today, we're quite honored to co-organize this event alongside, of course, nonprofit youth magazine, My Voice Canada. This event is also being co-organized by our head office or headquarters called justiceforall.org, which is based out of Chicago. And of course, we're really lucky to be joined by a few members of the leadership from Justice for All in Chicago. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining us on this Sunday morning. We're quite excited to get started. And do just bear with me while I try not to get the titles wrong of our respected team members here, members of our leadership. But I'll start with Adam Carroll, who is joining us as Director of UN Programs of the Burma Task Force Team lead, as well as of Justice for All. I'm going to let Adam take it away briefly in terms of a little bit of what he does, and then I'll move forward with introducing our next few panelists today.
Okay, thank you, Sister Saliha. Hello, everybody. I'm going to be really brief because we've got a lot to cover. I've worked for about almost 8 years, I can't believe it, at Burma Task Force, which is a program of Justice for All, and it does a lot of work on behalf of persecuted minorities, especially persecuted Muslim minorities in Asia, like the Uyghur and Rohingya, and Muslims in India. And we'll be talking about all that and how to make put our faith in action, really, on behalf of our sisters and brothers, whether they're Muslim or not, but people who are being persecuted, being locked up, being murdered by militaries around the world. You may have heard in the news this past month that there's been a military coup in Burma. And this is the same military that conducted genocide against the Muslim minority there. So it's a big challenge. Okay, that's it from me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and for also that, unfortunately, very sobering reminder of what's going on in Burma, or otherwise known as Myanmar. I wanted to next talk about the director of our Chicago-based headquarters, Justice for All. That would be Henna Zuberi, who is also here with us today. And really briefly, I just wanted to give her a chance in her own words to talk a little bit about what she does at the organization.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's amazing to have young people involved in the struggle for justice. So you'll learn a lot about in our presentation what justice means, and in your own, and really dig deep into what your own meaning of justice is. For myself, I'm here based in DC. I joined a Burma task force at that time as a volunteer, had been volunteering for a long time before started working full time for our main organization, Justice for All, which runs these campaigns. Um, we have quite a few campaigns, as you'll hear from our presentation later. And I just wanted to welcome all of you to this amazing workshop and hope you will learn a lot from us, inshallah. And we'll learn some from you too, because I think the youth keep teaching elders as well. So Jazakallah for being here.
Right, thank you so much. Some good points made. And last but certainly not least, I wanted to introduce a colleague of mine. So this is a Canadian team member of Justice for All Canada. He's soon going to be doing a little bit of an intro presentation as to the human rights advocacy work that we do. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Taha Gayoor onto the program today. He is, of course, the executive director here at Justice for All Canada. He does wear a few hats at the organization, but today he will be joining us as the executive director. And of course, just before he starts his presentation, we'd also like to hear a little bit about him as to the work that he contributes to, and the activities as well.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Sister Saliha, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here once again this morning. And I know it's been 1 hour less sleep of very precious sleep that you have been looking forward to, I'm sure, to catch up on. But thank you for being here this morning. And Sister Saliha is, of course, our communications coordinator at Justice for All Canada, and does a lot of the heavy lifting. MashaAllah, heavyweight lifting here. And I just serve as an executive director, just overseeing quite a lot of course, our programs here and campaigns, alhamdulillah. But, you know, we have people like Sister Saliha, we have people like Henna, Sister Henna Zuberi from Washington, D.C., and we have wonderful people like Brother Adam Carroll, many of whom, people like him, for instance, who have been associated for almost 8+ years, as you can see. And he joins us from New York. So we have an amazing team, and we have some great discussion coming up. So let me just dive right into our presentation this afternoon, or this morning, sorry. I'm losing sense of time here already. And we'll inshallah talk about, okay, so let me actually reshare where the document is, and we'll inshallah dive right into our presentation. Well, once again, welcome. And here is an agenda for us to have a quick look at, so we understand we are where we are at. We changed the order around a little bit. We wanted to start off with a quick introduction, and I'm glad we did, of the panelists. And thank you, Saliha, Sister Saliha, for doing that. Now, I wanted to start off by asking you one simple question. When you hear the word justice, what comes to your mind? I want to just hear from every single one of you one word, and you can do that in the chat box. I want to hear some answers. I want to see some flurry of responses here from you to get your thoughts on what does the word justice mean to you when you hear the word justice. Okay, I hear IBC equality. Okay, taking action, good. Morally correct, interesting. Think of fairness, good word. Equity. Well, a lot of people thinking along similar lines here.
One thing that I think of is not staying silent in the face of people or injustice happening. So, you know, that quote by, you know, the only thing that requires for evil to triumph is for good people to stay silent.
Excellent, very good. Very, very good. Love it. Collective liberation. Wow, man. You getting my you guys are getting my creative juices flowing already. This is great. Oh, this is good, Brother Adam. I like that. Justice is not just us. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Speaking up for what is right. Okay. Pretty cool. Very good. A lot of cool stuff coming up. Okay. Anything else? Worship, very interesting. And maybe this is something, Sister Henna, you want to elaborate on. What do you, when you hear the word justice, why worship comes to your mind?
Because I absolutely believe justice work is worship. This is the way we worship our Lord, by establishing justice on earth.
Wow, that's powerful. Very powerful. Very cool, guys. This is very good. I'm glad. And actually, I think you covered my presentation already, so I don't think I need to do any more presentation. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I want to hear another from you guys. Another set of, actually, you know what? Let's go into what Justice for All does, and then we'll come back and hear from you and keep thinking as we go through this presentation for the next 7 minutes or so, or maybe 7 to 10 minutes. Well, this presentation probably about 7 minutes. As you go through this, to think about the word human rights. What comes to your mind when we hear the word human rights? So next 10 minutes, we're going to go through a quick presentation along with a video for us to think about, for us to see what Justice for All does, what we are about, what we have accomplished, and we'll come back and we want to hear more from you. As you can see, there is actually a good breakout discussion that is going to be very specific on, specifically based on case studies and scenarios involving global and local issues. So let's go through our presentation. So, well, who are we? What is Justice for All, and what is Justice for All Canada? We are a not-for-profit organization that's focused on human rights, advocating for human rights. Specifically, who do we advocate for? We advocate on behalf of Indigenous minorities. Who are Indigenous minorities? Well, these are the individuals or people who belong here to begin with. They're the ones who actually live here. They have been here for since pretty much, beginning of time, or for the longest time possible. It is their land, it is their property, and in most cases, we have hijacked, we have stolen lands and sitting on broken treaties, essentially, as settlers in this part of the world, whether it's North America or anywhere around the world. Unfortunately, Indigenous people are now a minority, and usually mostly an oppressed minority. While our focus is specifically, in most cases, Muslim minorities around the world, not majority countries, but minorities, we, of course, advocate for, we stand with, we stand in solidarity with, and amplify voices of any minority that is experiencing oppression, crimes against humanity, or genocide. And of course, we are our main focus really is here at the end of the day to defend the human rights of minorities around the world. And we're going to hear a little bit more about it. And as Sister Saliha mentioned earlier, we are basically a branch of our parent organization, essentially based out of US. Out of Chicago in the US. So how do we do what we do, or what do we do exactly? I mean, when you hear the word advocacy, it sounds like a very, heavy duty legal term. What does that mean essentially at the end of the day when we were saying we defend human rights, we advocate for them? Well, these are 5 pillars of our work. These are the 5 things we do. And I'm going to just show you very quick examples right after this under each of our key campaigns. How we do what we do, some examples of each of those, inshallah, as we zip through this presentation. So one is we do community education, which is what we're doing right now, right here. This is community education. We do webinars, seminars, film screenings, teach-ins, you name it. We do all sorts of stuff. Alhamdulillah. We do cultural type of events, artistic events to humanize the causes and minorities, for instance. That's one aspect of our work. The other aspect is community organizing. We organize people to take action, which is where you're going to see, for instance, protests or peaceful protests, or organizing people to write letters to their MPs. So letter writing campaigns is part of organizing, making phone calls, asking people to make phone calls. We do a lot of that organizing work. And then the advocacy and government relations, of course, is the most critical, one of the most critical pieces. And that is basically pushing the Canadian government or other stakeholders out there, pushing the United Nations through the work of people like Brother Adam, for instance. In the US, we have people like Sister Henna, who does a lot of this advocacy and government relations work, specifically or lobbying work on the Hill, or in Canada, lobby work in the Parliament, for instance, or this is basically our this is what we do. This is the bulk of our work, actually, advocating, which is asking government to take actions XYZ based on certain policies that we want to see changed. Fourth item is media monitoring. We monitor the media. We go after the media if there is an incorrect information, or we ourselves, of course, write op-eds every now and then, or we promote or highlight those who have been writing good op-eds and articles on issues of social justice, anti-racism, and so on, and anti-Islamophobia. And the last one, but not least, is coalition building. We, alhamdulillah, work in Canada, for instance, with essentially, over 100 different organizations on different fronts. We have, of course, the Canadian Council of Imams on the religious community side, but then we have human rights organizations and anti-war groups that we work with both in the US and Canada. And without coalition building, of course, this work is going to be very challenging. So what are some of our campaigns? Well, you may have heard and seen some of these. These are our core campaigns. Burma Task Force is where we all started. And I want to actually start off by giving you a very quick brief history of where we all started 30 years ago, when I was not even around, of course. And that was Bosnian Task Force in early 90s. This is where Justice for All's birth began, back in Chicago, with Bosnian Task Force, alhamdulillah. And at that time, as you know, there was a major war happening, a genocide taking place in the heart of Europe. And unfortunately, nobody was speaking out. So for the first time, American Muslims came together to actually advocate for it. And alhamdulillah, they achieved a lot of great results. For the first time, they had the only ever the largest ever rally in front of the Hill. Of course, that was one thing, but then they also were able to get the war to stop, of course, sadly too late. We were also, because of the efforts, Bosnian Task Force was able to get the United Nations to declare rape as a war crime for the first time ever. So that's how we started. And since then, we have done several campaigns, but one of them is, of course, Burma Task Force, that was launched both in Canada and the US back in almost 2012, when nobody knew the word Rohingya, what was happening to them. Save Uyghur campaign is something we launched about 3 years ago, where we know that there's for the past 3+ years, we have over 3 million Uyghur Muslims from a population of about 11 something, Uyghur population in the Xinjiang province, or East Turkestan, as part of China now. They are in the world's largest concentration camps. And there's so much we can talk about forced labor and forced sterilization, forced indoctrination, and so on. Free Kashmir campaign is another campaign we launched about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years back now, especially when the siege of Kashmir started by the occupying Indian Army, which has been occupying this place for over 70 years. Unfortunately, we also launched Save India from Fascism campaign, because right after the Kashmir siege, we see India, of course, amending its citizenship laws, which is now holding Indian Muslims as hostages, over 200 million Muslims, in many ways through its deliberate Islamophobic campaigns that we can talk about today later. And 2 more campaigns since then, which are not represented here, that we have launched now over the past few months. And one of them is Sri Lanka Task Force, and we'll talk about it a bit later. And the other one we're just about to launch, in the process of launching, is French Islamophobia. So let me just now quickly zip through what we have been up to. I'm not going to go into details because our time is short. These are some of the highlights of our work last year. As you may have seen some of our work, our impact involves, we produce over 100 infographics, 4,500 online advocacy actions, meaning people like you took actions through our online campaigns. We had 18+ action alerts issued. We had 6 parliamentary petitions supported by us and pushed by us, in fact, to make it a success. We have 80+ imams and masjids engaged. We have over 120 interfaith and human rights organizations are associated with us, and 25+ press releases, statements issued And we had 10 live and virtual events, major events, along with our head office that we conducted. So I'll just go through very quickly what we have been doing, and I'm not going to talk much about it. Essentially, so under some of our campaigns like Save Uyghur, you can see that we worked with over 120 human rights organizations to send a joint letter to Justin Trudeau about what's happening in Uyghur people. We joined along with our head office 71 international organizations asking for global sanctions against the government. We endorsed Bob Ray's call to the United Nations to investigate Uyghur genocide in East Turkestan. We challenged Global Mail and Mail a few months back when they published basically a mouthpiece, propaganda piece by Chinese government. We met this particular MP in our office, along with Sister Saliha and our board member Hassan Kazi, MP Garnett Guinness, who has been the greatest advocate of Uyghur cause. We invited him to an interview on our show, Canada Today show, and a part of this conversation, part of the campaign, of course, was 9 petitions, which is historic. 9 petitions were actually read out, different petitions by 9 different MPs in the parliament last summer because of all the advocacy work, not only just us doing, but our Uyghur brothers and sisters and our community partners doing. Just last week, mashallah, we had an amazing event. The Sister Henna, Sister Saliha, and others from our Uyghur team actually organized this wonderful event on the International Women's Day, for instance. So this is just an idea of what we have been doing. Save India from Fascism. We've been talking for about a year and a half about what's happening. So we launched a campaign asking people to sign petitions. When Amnesty International was, and specifically Amnesty India was shut down, we actually launched a campaign supporting, asking people to stand with Amnesty India. And by the way, this was pretty much the only human rights organization that was talking about Kashmir all this time. We just connected. So Kashmir, we just talked about. We have been doing letter writing campaigns, petitions for the past 1 month, 1.5 years. One of the historic things we were able to achieve last summer was, alhamdulillah, or September, was that after 17 years, for the first time in our parliament, Kashmir was mentioned and it was highlighted thanks to the 2 petitions by 2 different MPs that were brought up. And again, we pushed for it. Just a month ago, last month, we had an amazing Kashmir Solidarity Day. We had some wonderful Canadian and American leaders who spoke at this event. We also did film screenings last fall season on Kashmir, and we did an amazing event called India's Colonization of Kashmir, which was done, brought to you by about 70 organizations in Canada, along with, of course, our efforts, alhamdulillah, back in October. Burma Task Force being our flagship project, we launched a letter to the Parliament, Indian Parliament, asking them not to, of course, basically kick out the refugees, Burmese refugees or Rohingya refugees from India. We asked Bangladesh government recently to stop the mass Rohingya refugee relocation to a Bashan Char, which is an island which is unsafe, and unfortunately we have been demanding this for quite some time, and it's very, very unsafe, unfortunately. So this is part of one of our recent campaigns. But I want to actually just share with you very quickly, alhamdulillah, Rohingya are in Canada, we have had some great success because of what we have been doing with Rohingya on the Rohingya cause. Alhamdulillah, we were able to get the Canadian government to call it a genocide, unanimously declared, Canada being the first country in the world to call it a genocide. Bob Ray went down to Cox's Bazar in the camps in Bangladesh and developed a detailed report. Our government pledged $300+ million for refugees, and we were able to get the head of state called Aung San Suu Kyi to be stripped of an honorary citizenship, Canadian citizenship, which is a first ever action of its kind. We just recently launched Sri Lanka Task Force because of the forced cremations that were happening and Islamophobic actions that are happening in Sri Lanka. And the last but not least, the most recent one being that back in fall again, we were able to launch a anti-Islamophobia campaign against what's happening in France. And so these are some of the things we do. We do write letters to local MPs. We do focus, we target global leadership. We do petitions of sorts, social media campaigns, expert discussions. We're going to talk a little more about it, creative projects and film screenings and so on. I want to just show you this short video, and we'll inshallah get into some fun stuff right in just a moment.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. Past campaigns covered a wide range of humanitarian concerns. Through Bosnia Task Force, imams and leaders of Chicago's Muslim community worked to ensure Bosnia became a top national issue. This led to life-saving American policies in Bosnia. A key accomplishment was helping to get rape declared a war crime. Initiatives also included Kosovo Task Force, Central African Republic Task Force, and Flint Coalition, which brought awareness to the water crisis affecting the people of Flint, Michigan. Highlights of our work include supporting Black Lives Matter, Parliament of the World's Religions, addressing climate change.
So wasteful consumption starts the ruthless production, and that's where we need all the fossil fuel in the world.
And prominent media exposure.
This is Imam Malik Mujahid, President of Justice for All.
And I'm the Director of Outreach for Justice for All.
And that's why we need to go back to what worked.
Today we're demanding an apology from the CEO of Costco.
The Chinese crackdown on Uyghurs and other Turkic people has only gotten worse.
Programs such as Burma Task Force advocate for the rights of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, internally displaced populations, and all those denied freedom of movement and at risk of starvation. Through this, we mobilized thousands of calls to elected representatives. This paved the way for the U.S. to increase funding for Rohingya refugees from $30 million to $210 million. Two of our documentaries were featured on international news outlets. The Rohingya People, A Slow Burning Genocide, on BBC World News, and Rohingya Refugees Tell of Massacre was featured on CNN. We've organized rallies, UN mission visits, expanded presentations on campuses, promoted research and report writing, outreach to think tanks, media, and other influencers. Faith Coalition educates about the Rohingya genocide and crimes against humanity faced by ethnic groups in Burma. We've traveled to refugee camps, convened a meeting of Karen, Kachin, and Rohingya leaders, both to encourage cooperation and to guide them in congressional outreach. Organized Rohingya Advocacy Day. This led to over 100 participants visiting the offices of 60 U.S. senators and congressional representatives. Free Kashmir advocates for the people of Kashmir. Long-term goals include the call for self-determination, the end of the Indian military's occupation of the territory, and raising awareness of Kashmiri issues among the American people. After the August 5th reinvasion of Kashmir, we organized national protests in front of various Indian government buildings, partnered with Stand With Kashmir, and launched a petition condemning the Gates Foundation's decision to present Prime Minister Modi a humanitarian award. Save Uyghur informs Muslims and neighbors of other faiths about the ongoing cultural genocide of Uyghur Muslims and mobilizes public support. Our projects include boycotting Chinese products with our Fast from China campaign, pushing Bill S-178 in the Senate, and organizing a nationwide protest of Costco. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Okay, thank you so much for watching and listening. So this was a presentation so far of what we are about, what we are doing, what and how we can, of course, also get involved. I'm sorry, I'm trying to actually just exit out of this. Give me 1 second. So, this was sort of the end of the more of a boring stuff, and I'm hoping, inshallah, we can now talk about a little bit more about, why social justice in Islam and from our perspective, and we'll keep that brief before we get into our, more engaging discussions. But I want to start off by asking you quickly, what comes to your mind when you hear the word or words or phrase human rights? Because a lot what has been said, a lot has been talked about. I want to hear from you. What is human rights from your perspective?
It would be really great if everybody could speak up too, just because it makes it so much more interesting.
Yes, I was going to actually suggest that. Thank you so much.
Videos are always a plus. I really appreciate videos being turned on.
Yes, I would love to see the wonderful, beautiful faces of our My Voice team, as well as all the wonderful young people who are joining us today. So please, 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 it would be great if we can see you and hear from you, more importantly. I want to hear what comes to your mind when you hear the word justice. Human rights. So let's get
one thing that comes to my mind is that no matter where you are around the world, you have the same rights as somebody living across the world. So, for example, a Rohingya person deserves to be treated in the same way that somebody living in Toronto or New York or Chicago would be treated if they were faced with the same hardships. So just because living in a developing country doesn't mean that they have any lesser right to ask for the same things.
Excellent. Very good. Excellent. Somebody says standing up for the rights of humans when they are suffering at the hands of others. Okay, very good. So similar to what you just said. Thank you so much. Anything else comes to your mind?
When I think of human rights, I think of a constant fight or a constant struggle to achieve human rights for everybody.
Great. So it is a constant struggle, fighting basically for rights of other people, no matter who they are. Very good. Very good. Anything else comes to your mind when you hear the word human rights? Or phrase?
Basic needs of survival that should be given to every human.
Good. Very good. Yes, it's a matter of survival. Very good. Lama says, I think of peace. Very good. That's a good one too. You definitely, how can you have human rights without peace? Protect human welfare. Very good, Charlotte. Thank you for sharing that. Excellent. What else comes to mind? Freedom and equality, access to basic needs. Very good. Very good, Sarah Ahmed. Very good. Okay, I think that's a that's a good start and a good segue into a discussion that and a bit of a conversation that I want to, inshallah, have with you about why human rights, of course, and why social justice is important from Islamic perspective. And so I know you've already heard me for quite some time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually see if my colleague, Sister Henna, can share her perspective, what she thinks, why, from her perspective, Islam, from not just her perspective, but why, as a Muslim, we should stand up for social justice. I want to just hear a couple of thoughts from you, Sister Henna, then I'll share a couple of thoughts for myself, and then, inshallah, we get into our panel discussion, not panel discussion, but breakout rooms.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Brother Taha. So from my perspective, and also from Justice for All's perspective, one thing that we are a faith-based human rights organization. So we don't just work on a secular framework. We base the 10 basic fundamental human rights from an Islamic perspective, mainly from the Quran and the Prophet's sayings and deeds, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these rights are as followed, according to our Sharia: the right to life, the right to live in dignity, the right to justice, the right to equal protection of the law, the right of choice, the right of free expression, the right to privacy, the right of property, and the right to basic necessities of life, and even the right to revolt. So these are basics that, subhanAllah, a lot of times, even those of us who may be growing up in a Muslim environment don't realize that the Sharia gives us these rights. And the beautiful thing about the Sharia is that it is like, the way scholars have taught us is that it is like a path to water. So it changes according to the vessel, right? So if your vessel is long and deep, then the Sharia changes long and deep. And if it's wide and broad, then the Sharia in that. And so it changes according to the urf of the land as well. Urf of the land would mean what circumstances you're around, what the culture of the land is, the ethos of the land. But there are basic rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given every human being, every creature he has created on this earth as a human being. And those are defined by the Quran. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is the basis of what we work on, has told us in the Quran over and over again to establish qist, adl and qist. That means justice and equity. And that is the framework that we work under. That is why we believe this is absolutely imperative that we work to establish justice. And like a lot of times we hear establishment of salah, right? Even in our mosques, from the khutbah, from the mimbar, and alhamdulillah, that is a fard, right? That's incumbent on us to pray. But along with that, very seldom do we hear our khatibs talking about justice and establishment of justice. And this is a commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to establish justice on this earth. And how we do it is through the lens of the Sharia. We cannot go beyond, and beyond what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, and which includes one really important point that a lot of times secular frameworks might not include, is that there should be that you work for the oppressed and then you work to correct the oppressor. So it's, there's a very famous hadith as well, and on this. So I know we want to get into our breakout room soon, so I'm not going to go further on that, but I hope we can talk a little bit more about this in our panel discussion, inshallah.
Awesome. Thank you, Sister Henna. That was really good. Thank you so much for sort of shaping our conversation based on very basic Islamic fundamental teachings on human rights and justice and social justice. Just to add to what you just said, a couple of things. I mean, it's interesting how, as you mentioned, the word qist and the word adl, these are the two words. If there's one thing you can take away from Islamic perspective, it's really that these are two words that are repeated so often in the Quran, and sometimes we don't think about it. Like, why is Allah talking about the word qist and adl, which is fairness, and qist meaning justice, over and over again? And what is also interesting is that, as we know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in one place a universal mission of all the prophets was what? Establishing qist. So it's interesting that after calling people to Allah and Tawheed, which is what all the prophets did, one thing that's common among all of them was that all invited people to qist and social justice. So this is what justice qist means. This is what social justice is about. the other couple other things to keep in mind, being that, I guess one of the most fundamental, Sister Henna, when I hear about this, one of the most fundamental things come to my mind is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he told us that when you see an evil, what do? Anybody remembers? What do you do when you see an evil happen? 3 things.
Try to change it with your hands.
Change it with your hands. You can't do it, then what?
Change it with your words.
Use your words, right? Write, speak, scream, chant, sing, whatever comes to your mind, just do it, just articulate and say it. Sign a petition, write a letter, make a phone call. All of that is part of it, right? And if you can't do that even, which would be sad if he can't do it, then what else can we do? Or what else we should do at the least? Who remembers?
At least hate it in your heart.
Hate it in your heart. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that ذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. This is like the lowest level of your faith. The least you should do is you hate it in your heart. Don't be so complacent. Make dua at the least. At the least. But we gotta go beyond that. This is not the time for us to sit around and let the world be taken over by injustice. And we are basically, unfortunately, getting in, being complacent, people who are just simply absorbing and watching what's happening. So at this point, we want to, inshallah, move on to our breakout rooms. I'll let Sister Saliha, who is our communications coordinator at Justice for All Canada, to take it from here for us to get into more one-on-one conversations about specific campaigns that we're working on. There's a lot that we could talk about, and there is a lot that we will talk about with you and hear from you more specifically when we come back. So Jazakumullah khair, and thank you guys for your participation so far, and we're going to see more of it soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Taha, for that really informative presentation. I think that it's a good way to, first of all, segue into our next session, which is our breakout rooms. I do want to ask everyone to be able to stick around, of course. What's going to happen next is with the help of our good friend at My Voice Canada, Nargis Naqvi, is she will be dividing everybody into their respective groups, so breakout rooms. That'll be done automatically. You don't have to click on anything. And you will also be paired up with one of our panelists here, so either Brother Taha or Henna or Adam. So once you are in your respective group, you'll be given a case study, a really short, really brief one-pager case study, as well as a set of questions that you could answer together. You don't have to write anything down, but just through discussion, through one-on-one question and answer with your team members as well as your team lead, just to answer or just discuss the case study that you might have read together. Once we're done that, we're going to come back into this main group here, and we will all go through our case studies one by one, and we'll just hear from you and any kind of thoughts that you had about that, and then we'll take it from there. So if we could definitely maybe move forward into our breakout room sessions as soon as you're ready, Sister Nargis.
Sure, go right ahead. It's not too long, it's just a one-pager, and we're okay. Going to listen to you. Go ahead, thank you. Okay.
Osman is a 38-year-old man who lives in Mississauga. 10 years ago, Osman immigrated to Canada from Bangladesh, leaving behind his wife named Samsad and his 9-year-old son Shomrat. Osman works full-time as an assistant manager at an ethnic grocery store near Toronto. Osman has not been able to keep in touch with them because of weak cell phone service in their village home in Bangladesh. At work, Osman can't help but share his excitement and happiness with his colleagues. He recently learned that the Government of Canada finally processed his sponsorship application, which seeks to bring Samsad and Shomrat to Canada. This will be the first time in 10 years that Osman is reuniting with his family. Shomrat was 19 years old when he arrived to Canada. At the airport, Osman noticed his son seemed nervous, distant, and non-communicative. Over the months, Osman and his wife Samsad were concerned for Shomrat, who grew more isolated. So they enrolled him in special education classes and regular cognitive behavioral therapy at Trillium Health Partners Hospital. One day, while out for a walk with his caretaker named Jason, Shomrat entered the local town center while holding his bike to his side. He was not riding his bike. A police officer named Eric noticed this and asked him to park his bike outside instead. Shomrat couldn't hear what the police officer was saying because he was standing far away. Shomrat felt nervous and instead started walking faster, still carrying his bike. The police officer began pacing after Shomrat. Jason tried telling the police officer that Shomrat is unwell. The police officer noticed Shomrat start mumbling something and assumed he was showing resistance. Shomrat was actually diagnosed with schizophrenia, meaning he sometimes speaks himself. The police officer caught up to Shomrat, threw his body over him, and struck him in the face at least once before cuffing him. Shomrat's father, Osman, is currently working with a lawyer and the National Council of Canadian Muslims to bring justice to what was done to Shomrat.
So sorry, I forgot to mention, we are going to be talking about the Kashmir issue. Anybody knows what's happening with Kashmir? This case study specifically is about Kashmir, but anybody knows what's happening with Kashmir or in Kashmir? Who can define?
So 2018, I believe, or 2019, August, they removed a long-standing law or a constitutional amendment that India had that allowed Kashmiris to have a more autonomy and a kind of their own special status. And the Modi government took that away, and it's said that this step was taken to kind of remove the cultural autonomy and bring more people from outside of Kashmir into Kashmir, and ensure that they're basically more pro-Modi at this point. And countless human rights abuses. There's been no form of taking people to court. The justice system isn't working. Political leaders have been under house arrest. The internet has been muzzled. They just reinstated the internet after 2 years. And of course, the media is completely not free.
Yes, excellent. MashaAllah, you summarized really well. Excellent. This is really what it is. And just a bit of a background, of course, sadly, Kashmir has been, in this situation, similar situation, not under siege the way it is right now, but Kashmir has been an occupied territory and disputed occupied territory for the past 70 plus years. So in 1947, when the India and Pakistan basically, split, and Kashmir was, at that time, 1947, this was decided by United Nations that this is and declared that this is a disputed territory, meaning neither India nor Pakistan owns it technically, and it was based on the 1948 resolution that allows for Kashmiris to have a right to self-determination. Unfortunately, the Indian government since then has occupied Kashmir, and just to give an idea, for one Kashmiri who lives there, and they were talking about, say about 8 million Kashmiris there, essentially. For one Kashmiri, there are 10, just imagine this, there are 10 either police personnel or military people guarding them. I mean, this is unbelievable. I'm sorry, the other way around. For every one Kashmiri, there are every 10 Kashmiris, there is one individual police personnel or army personnel from India, literally keeping an eye over them. And since for the past 70 years, mass amounts of levels of atrocities that have occurred over the years. And saddest part is, just like Palestine, sadly, not many people and not many governments and people talk about what's happening in Kashmir. So, but what has happened is, why are we talking about it now? Why is it a big deal now? As Sean just mentioned, unfortunately, back in August 2019, Indian police and paramilitary forces basically put a siege on Kashmir, which basically now makes 8 million Kashmiris living in an open air prison, and they don't have access to some basic things that Chan just mentioned. So I want you now just to take a quick look at this case study, and let's have a quick discussion about this. So I'll stay quiet now and let you guys read, and let me know when you are ready to scroll down, because I don't want to Actually, maybe I can just reduce the size a little bit if that works. Yeah, that should be it. Hopefully, can you guys still read it? Okay, there you go. I'll give you guys 3 minutes.
Actually, we could take turns reading it. I'll just start and then I'll just kick it over to all of you to take a turn. It's 1982. Habibur Rahman, or Habib, is a 9-year-old Rohingya Muslim boy living in a village in Rakhine. Rakhine is a state located in the west coast of Burma. Habib goes to the village school and dreams of becoming a pilot. Habib's parents, Abdul Karim and Mamuna, own an herbal medicine shop. Habib is excited to become a big brother in a few months. Okay, Seth, if you could take over the reading.
Yeah. Okay. So one day, Habib's family and their neighbors gather in the township square to listen to some hurried announcements being made by village leaders. A popular military leader, Ni Win, just introduced a new countrywide law that says in order to be a citizen, you must be a member of specific ethnic groups. Apparently, Rohingya is not included in that list. Since then, Habib's family stopped calling themselves Rohingya. They paid someone to create fake documents showing they're from a different ethnicity. Habib was not allowed to talk about his Rohingya background.
Okay. How about Javeria?
Sure. Habib's mother, Maimuna, gave birth at home because Rohingya are no longer allowed inside hospitals or schools. One day, members of the army also trashed his parents' shop and attacked them. A few years later, Habib's family learned the soldiers were now planning to destroy all Rohingya homes in their village to make way for constructing military toilets. Habib's father, Abdul Karim, decided their family would run away to Sitwi, another ancestral home of the Rohingya.
Okay, and Charlotte?
I think she mentioned she just has to step out for a second.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Maybe if you don't mind finishing up.
Sure, yeah. Over time, Habib and his family faced even more persecution, forcing them to run away many times over. It is now 2021. Habib's family has separated to keep safe from the army. His mother, Maimuna, lives on the Myanmar-China border. His little sister lives in Cox's Bazar, the world's largest refugee camp in Bangladesh. His father, Abdul Karim, was killed in 2017 military raid. Habib has fled to Malaysia, where he lives without refugee status because Malaysia is not a signatory of the UN Refugee Convention.
Yes. So my colleague Saliha put this together, but it sounds to me very familiar from the Rohingya refugees that I know, and it could almost be exactly somebody's story. It might be a combination, but so this situation, you see over the years the effect of persecution on one family, death, they're scattered, they don't have rights. So somebody's just arriving. Okay. I was, first of all, what are your thoughts about this situation?
Feel free just to share like any thoughts that come to mind before I start these questions. And I also just shared on my screen. I'm going to zoom in here. So I shared the questions on the screen. So did anybody have just any underlining thoughts after reading about Ashramrat's story? Or even if you didn't catch the whole story, have you noticed anything like this on the news or like in your own circles, in your community or anything like that?
I guess in general, I think it's just kind of unfortunate how law enforcement they blow things out of proportion and they don't really look deep into the situation. Like with the whole situation with George Floyd, the officer just kind of assumed something and he completely, disregarded everything else. And so I think it's probably obviously built on their own prejudices and biases, but I think this is, yeah, something that we've noticed obviously in the news as a pattern.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just kind of unfortunate.
No, yeah, I agree. And I think that a lot of these people find themselves in helpless situations just because it keeps happening over and over again. And most recently with Ijaz Chowdhury, just this year, who was, I think he was a Pakistani man in, I think, Markham. So, when that happened, Yusuf Solomon, who is the brother of Yusuf Fakiri, who is the brother of Solomon that was killed in prison, he was outraged. I mean, he said, as someone that's been doing this work for a long time, he said, we always feel like we're kind of at that point where a change is being made or kind of awareness is being spread. But he said, I think just people can really tend to feel helpless. And I think that from a law enforcement perspective, the quote unquote change that we're talking about is what? So in my mind, it would be actual training and sensitivity on the part of all police officers.
He would have trouble accessing online his online courses or stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
Very good. And actually this is very good. So accessing students, especially students, how are you going to study? How are you going to access courses? I mean, if you can't even move around, right? So that's a very good point. Sorry, I think Face, you said something. Yes, go ahead, please share your input. Yes, go ahead.
I think slow internet, yes, it does affect student life, but just it affects your life as a person in general. Just sharing stuff online, like you said, Zoom calls and stuff like that. Imagine being able to speak to once in a lifetime chance to talk to someone who's important, maybe the government or maybe a member of parliament, someone who's credible. But because of internet's not available, you missed out on that chance to speak with that person who can actually help out. So I think that does affect it. And on top of that, he's a journalist, right? He's sharing, taking pictures, all that. When you're a journalist, you need to have a way to post it on the internet. Otherwise, you're not really a journalist, right? Because you're not sharing it with anyone. So if you're your opportunity to share is taken away, it really makes it difficult to do anything, really. So yeah, that's my opinion on it.
You get them to erase their own ethnicity and then get other people to not accept them. And by doing that is you don't let them go to school or public places or anything like that, to basically erase their identities. So directly, no, I've never heard of, people not being allowed into hospitals so abruptly like that, but I know it does unfortunately exist and happen.
Yeah, that's even happened during the pandemic where they won't allow Rohingya in if they're sick. It's making the Rohingya a threat or demonizing them. Also, it's tied to the checkpoints that the military for so many years has placed on the roads, that Rohingya have to show their identity papers, which they may not even have by now, and they are not allowed to travel from village to village. Many of them, of course, they're smart. They walk through the jungles or the forests, but then again, they can be just shot and killed by the military. So it's been a terrible, situation for them. There's 1 million that have fled into Bangladesh, but we've got another 1 million in other countries, Saudi Arabia even, but Malaysia has 150,000. India has quite a few. Indonesia has some. They're all scattered. Thailand used to. And then there are other Burmese ethnicities that have also suffered in similar ways, though maybe not as dramatically, and suffered also from mass rape and other kinds of, really oppressive tactics. So this is a story about, the oppression of a group, and those who have fled to Malaysia Recently that was a pretty good place for a Rohingya refugee to end up in. But now their politics is beginning to blame the Rohingya refugees. Why? For the pandemic. Totally not true. Totally playing politics. And you've seen how immigrants are treated in the US and other countries. They become a political pawn or a plaything in the media. People blame things on them. And of course, they're doing the lowest paying jobs often. So it's easy to blame vulnerable communities. So this is unfortunate global problem. And let's look at another page that talks about some questions that we can start thinking critically and maybe constructively about what to do. Let me see if I go into here. Yeah. All right. So here are the questions that we're supposed to look at together. Collective problem solving. All right. So I think this is pretty obvious, but maybe if you can jump in, Brother Mohammed, since you came in the middle of it, maybe you could answer the first one.
Yeah, sure. It's just like, what a lot of refugees would go through just to avoid persecution, avoid discrimination, avoid any sort of harassment, because they want to they want to live in a space where they can feel safe, right? Like they don't want to be exposing their identity just to feel just to be denied any such service, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think even if we're relatively privileged, we can all imagine that, right? Having to hide your identity. Okay, number 2. Oh, Saif, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the first question. That also made me think of the Holocaust, the hiding of their ethnic backgrounds, and why that's so important is because the Rohingya people are so racialized, because all of this whole issue is rooted in the fact that the government and these powers are blaming their ethnicity and using that as like a pawn to push their violence. So that's why it's so important for these victims to have to hide their ethnic backgrounds, and because their safety depends on it.
Yep, good, very good point. And we find that though we may disagree with some Jews and Israelis about Palestine, or have different perspectives, many Jews are very concerned about the Rohingya because they do see the similarities. And we also see that with the Uyghur, that they were relatively quick to see, that these are concentration camps, and that the same dynamic basically is going on. Not everyone wants to use the G word, genocide, and some of our government leaders really try to avoid it because they're afraid that if we use that word, it will compel us to action. Of course, that's the point, action. So Habib, about his childhood dream of becoming a pilot. By the way, is Charlotte with us? Is she back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Welcome, Sam. Hi. So what do you think about number 2?
I'm curious, is it kind of catch up half of the previous case? I'm quite curious, is it possible for Habits to fulfill his childhood dreams in that situations? Like seems like all the armies dominate the city there, and all the politics is all under control. So is it possible for a normal human to fulfill their dreams there?
Yeah, I mean, so many would think about just escaping the country in order to
Yeah.
fulfill their dreams, which is really sad.
Yeah.
We work with a Rohingya leader who's now in Texas. His name is Shwe Maung. He was the last Rohingya to be elected to office in Burma, even during the years when Rohingya were being mistreated increasingly. They still had rights to run for office for a long time, until 2015, I think. So the rights were taken away bit by bit and not all at once. It was like the horrible story about boiling a frog slowly so that as the water heats up, it doesn't realize what's happening.
Yeah.
But anyway, as far as, he had a dream about being a political leader, and he was able to until quite late. But now, of course, he's here. He can't be there. And if he was there, he would certainly be in jail right now. So this is awful, and it's stifling human potential. We can also say that the Rohingya, who, and many of them are children, who are living in the camps in Bangladesh, yes, they're safe, but there's hardly any school for them. The government of Bangladesh, though it has given safe haven to the Rohingya, has been very reluctant to provide education, even though it's being paid for by the international community, because they're afraid the Rohingya will stay. And Bangladesh, as I don't know if anyone here is Bangladeshi of origin, but you know that it's a very crowded country already and not wealthy. So there's a lot of concern about the Rohingya staying. But that's not the Rohingyas' fault. And it's really sad. Well, I'm actually working on a report about education for Rohingya children and how lacking it is. So being a pilot, very difficult to see. So is Habib luckier than his parents because he was able to flee to Malaysia?
I would hardly call it, I'd be hesitant to say lucky, because at the end of the day, they are separated. So, I mean, they really have lost a lot. And one of the things I was thinking about, where it asks what are some challenges, in the previous story, it said that Malaysia isn't, like, even though it's relatively safe for Malaysia, isn't a signatory of the UN Refugee Convention. And I don't know too much about it, but I'm assuming that means that they don't have like specific rights as a refugee. So that could still cause a lot of problems in terms of, where he finds refuge, like where he finds a home or food or education or anything like that.
That's right. A lot of countries decided not to sign on to that treaty, and so they're not giving refugees the right under that convention. They just don't call them refugees. They call them forced migrants or something else. And because they use a different word, they don't have to give the same services, including education. It was easier. There was more freedom of movement in Malaysia. But again, that is getting much more difficult. And they were even trying to deport 1,200 Rohingya recently from Malaysia to Burma, even during a coup. It's so you can see that it's no longer being guided by human rights concerns. It used to be that Rohingya, as a minority, opened a lot of small restaurants, and they were allowed to kind of be part of society in Malaysia in a way. Even if it was not at the high level, but that gives hope, and it recognizes that all immigrants, they have a fire burning that they want to get out of their situation and work hard. I mean, it's great to invest in immigrants for that reason. They benefit everybody, but instead they're being treated as outsiders. They're being othered. So whether he's lucky or not is an interesting question. And of course, these are some of the challenges that he's facing. Number 4, let's look at number 4, and maybe Mohammed, could you read that one?
In your own perspective, what are some of the reasons why Habib and his family become displaced from their indigenous home of Rakhine? Is that how you pronounce it?
Rakhine. Yeah, yeah.
Rakhine.
Yeah. So, what do you all think? Why are they now all scattered as a family?
Can I take a shot?
Yeah.
Opportunity.
Yep. But then the government is going to call Habib an economic migrant, not a refugee. So opportunity is fair enough. Maybe he wants to be a pilot and he thinks eventually he's going to get it or his children will get it. But so opportunity is fair. Everyone should have the right to opportunity. But what else could you say if you were Habib's lawyer?
I mean, in that situation, it sounds like you almost don't have a choice. You go kind of the first place you can step your foot into. And for his mother, it might have been something else, or maybe she's the one who decided that he goes to Malaysia and maybe it's safer for him there. But yeah, I don't imagine it to be like an easy decision.
Yeah. And, he may also have been sent as the young man most likely to make some money and send it back to his family. We see that, all over the world. But it is hard. Of course, most people, so many people in the world have cell phones, even Rohingya refugees. Just 2 weeks ago, my colleague who runs a Rohingya women's group based in Malaysia, she contacted me because there was a boat full of Rohingya lost in the sea, and they were calling her from their cell phone. And she was very concerned, and they did get assisted with food, but then their cell phone service ran out, and we just don't know what happened to them. I really pray that they found some landing. Families that are separated at least can stay in touch unless something bad happens. So we have about time to leave. So let me just see number 5. It's about to close us out and kick us out. So let's just end. But thanks for and hopefully feel free to share when we reach and join the larger group, which we're going to be doing in 40 seconds. Do you guys have any questions before we do that?
No, I think this is really great.
We work on something that's very difficult to solve, and the recent coup made it even more difficult. We're always looking for volunteers. I'm sure we're going to make a plea for volunteers, but if you all want help in any way, online mostly, just let us know. And, that's always very welcome. Okay.
Same time. Welcome back, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum again.
Welcome.
So a couple of things. I want to actually, before we get to the action item, I want to actually, again, take 30 seconds. I want to ask you why, I know you guys probably discussed it in your groups, why advocacy matters. Because we talked about justice, we talked about human rights, but we didn't specifically talk about advocacy specifically, because that's what we're here to do. I want to hear from you in the chat box before I ask you to actually go and take an action in just a moment. Why advocacy matters. What is advocacy? Advocacy is essentially petitioning on behalf of somebody who can't petition, essentially, making their amplifying their voices, right? So why do you think it matters in living as a Canadian living right here in Toronto or wherever it is? Why you think it matters? So one sentence, it could be one word. I want to hear this from you in chat box or or however you like. If you can speak, that's even better. So Javeria, because if you're not advocating for solution, you're part of the problem. Excellent. Very good. Why advocacy matters. Anybody else? Floor yours.
Some of us are in better positions to be able to get our voice out than others. So if we are, then we should be able to use our position.
Awesome. Privilege. Excellent. Okay. People in other countries might not have the chances to change their living situation. Very good. That's space. Sarah, Sarah says, since we are in a position of privilege where we have access to basic needs, it's our responsibility to stand up. Very good. Pace. Okay. Saif said, because advocacy impacts policy changes. Very good. We don't realize when we when we advocate, we impact the policy changes at the top level. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do it. Anything else before we move to actual actions? Okay, Charlotte. Advocacy could lead for hope and opportunity. Amazing. Very, very good. Very good stuff. Anything else?
I would think that advocacy is needed to bring justice.
Yes, very good. Very good. Excellent. I want to hear from Adam or Henna, if you have a word or two, maybe a line or two, why you think advocacy matters from your perspective and experience all these years. Just like Sister Nergis just mentioned something. If you have something to say, it's fine. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I'm going to kick it over to Sister Henna, who does a lot of advocacy on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. That's a specific kind of advocacy. I was wondering how you would think that plays into it. I mean, there's so many kinds of advocacy.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Brother Adam. And I will ask you the same question because you advocate at the United Nations and mashallah have been a voice for us, as many of you might know or not know. Justice for All is an accredited NGO at the United Nations, and we get to speak on behalf. Even just last year, we managed to bring the Uyghur activists to confront the Chinese ambassador, which has never been done in the history of the world, at the United Nations. And this was something that was facilitated by Brother Adam because of the long work he's done on Burma at the United Nations. In my work, I can tell you when I walk into a congressperson's office or a senator's office before the pandemic, and they would tell us if we come in, for example, on Kashmir, or if we come in on Burma, they will tell us, yes, today we received 3 calls from people on Burma. Today we received 11 calls for people on Kashmir, et cetera, et cetera. So they are writing down exactly how many of their constituents are calling them. If you were an intern in that's what interns at those offices do. They write down who's written, how many calls have come in on a particular topic, how many of those folks were constituents. And this changes. I mean, one thing that I remember, Steny Hoyer, he's the majority whip now he's the one of the highest ranking Democrats in the US Congress. He used to be my congressperson, and he told me this, because I really didn't used to get involved in advocacy work before, like I didn't think it made an impact. But he said something he said the system is made to lobby. That's how the system works. And sometimes, yes, there are special interest groups and there's a lot of like dark money, and we have a really, really sordid view of government. But I have seen actual bills get passed that we never thought would get passed because of the pressure of folks. And there have been times where they weren't passed because there would be one person standing and not letting it come onto the floor to be argued. So, these are from congressional or government advocacy points. And a lot of times our communities think that, you need to look a certain way or be dressed a certain way or whatever in order to go and advocate. And that's absolutely not true. You be you, and still they're your representatives because you live in their constituencies. They have to listen, even if they don't want to. And some of them don't want to. Some of them are Islamophobes themselves. But that shouldn't stop us from, number one, building coalitions with others who also are concerned about the same issue and going in full force. Like for right now, we're building a women's coalition against the Uyghur genocide and targeting women caucus members. So each the Congress in the United States has like a congressperson might be interested in a cause like women's rights. So they'll become a part of the women's caucus, or they might be interested in relationships with Canada. So they might be under the Canadian caucus. So that means that they take a special interest in that. Long story short, I have seen emails, I've seen calls work, and I cannot tell you how much it matters to be able to just book a visit. And you guys in Canada have it so much easier than we in the US, because your MPs aren't treated like these divine lords. May Allah forgive us. Your MPs are much more available to your constituents. You can grab them, they'll take phone calls. They act much more like normal human beings than our Congress people do. So I would suggest that you use it to your advantage.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was great. So let's take action now, guys, before we conclude. Two steps. One is I would like you all right now, as you are on your devices, to please go to justiceforallcanada.org/action. justiceforallcanada.org/action. You can do it on your devices right now. We'll take a 2-minute, literally it takes 1 minute each of these actions. I want you to take 2 actions right now. There are a bunch of actions listed here. Ask the Prime Minister to defend Rohingya from brutal Burmese military. This is one of the petitions. Another one was ask your MP to demand action from Canada on Kashmir, which is another petition or letter writing campaign. Ask Canadian lawmakers to remind Prime Minister of Canada of international responsibility to prevent persecution and genocide of ethnic minorities. This is, again, another letter. Demand action from Canadian government against Uyghur genocide. Seek local MP to advocate for against BJP fascism, violence in India, and also specifically action on what's happening to Rohingya refugee relocation. So these are some of them, and there's a whole bunch. There are many others in future that you can sign on to. But just so that you get an idea how to go through this process, very simple. Let me click on one right now. Look at this, sanctions on Burma. Asking Justin Trudeau to take action, just put sanctions in Burma. I'll walk you through this. It takes literally, look at this. I'm gonna put in my name here, Taha, last name, here you go. This is, mashallah, an amazing, powerful tool we have that we use. And all you have to do is put in your phone number, your email, your city, your whatever, and that's it. And here's a pre-written letter right here for you. Look at this. It's all built in the system. And I click on send message, and here you go. That's it. You're done. Okay. And you're going to receive a confirmation, of course, of the email that you sent as well. It's as simple as that. 30 seconds of advocacy, and it can do wonders, as Sister Henna mentioned. Literally every MP is waiting to receive, is counting how many emails and how many calls you're making on these issues. So that's pretty much it. I've done enough talking for today. This is a detour I wanted to make sure we take. And at the end, I just want to actually share with you, these are some actions you can take to advocate. Simple, basic stuff. Circulate and share campaigns on social media. So you just took an action. Why don't you share it on social media and amplify it? Research, write, content development is another area. And talk to us if you want to take action. If you need how to take action. Organize a letter writing campaign. Amplify the existing ones, or just talk to friends in your own circles and start writing campaigns. And organize a peaceful demonstration. Set up a JFA chapter in your area or on your campus, and of course raise funds for Justice for All Canada work. That's pretty much it as far as I'm concerned. If there's anything else anybody else wants to share in conclusion, please do so. Otherwise, I'm done here.